Imagine the world's biggest car company imploding in slow motion. General Motors, an American titan, once unstoppable, suddenly filing for bankruptcy. We unpack this entire story in a way you can actually feel. You will not just hear numbers, you will feel mounting pressure. This is not a corporate obituary. This is a cautionary tale for every modern business. How does a company that dominated the world disappear from history? How did General Motors fall so hard it needed government rescue? Let us begin with the sheer scale of what collapsed. General Motors was not just a car maker. It was a global empire. In the early 2000s, it sold more vehicles than anyone. It owned Chevrolet, Buick, Cadillac, GMC, Saab, Saturn, and Hummer. That diversity looked powerful but became a financial nightmare. Behind shiny showrooms, the company was drowning in obligations. When GM filed Chapter 11 in June 2009, reality hit. It reported $82 billion in assets. Its liabilities exceeded $172 billion. No amount of sales growth could close that gap. The collapse was years in the making. During the 90s, GM believed it was unstoppable. It expanded factories, brands, and management layers relentlessly. Warning signs from Japanese competitors were quietly ignored. American consumer preferences were changing rapidly. GM stayed locked into large trucks and fuel-hungry SUVs. When gas prices surged, buyers fled almost overnight. Profitable vehicles suddenly became massive liabilities. Meanwhile, Toyota, Honda, and Nissan raised quality standards. Their cars were cheaper, reliable, and far more efficient. They operated without bloated factories or aging systems. They simply out-engineered and out-managed Detroit. By mid-decade, GM was already bleeding billions annually. Profit margins evaporated as costs spiraled upward. High production volumes no longer meant profitability. Each car sold deepened the financial wound. Union contracts added another crushing burden. The United Auto Workers agreements were extremely generous. Pensions and healthcare obligations reached staggering levels. These promises were locked in through decades of negotiations. By 2008, GM supported roughly 1.4 million retirees. That figure represented enormous long-term financial risk. Every closure carried decades of obligations behind it. GM operated a welfare system alongside car manufacturing. Foreign competitors carried far lighter cost structures. They had fewer pensions and more flexibility. They adapted quickly while GM moved painfully slow. Running GM was like steering a massive ship with paddles. Then the financial crisis struck at the worst moment. Credit markets froze almost instantly. Consumers could no longer finance large purchases. US auto sales collapsed from 70 million annually. They fell below 10 million in record time. For a volume-dependent company, this was catastrophic. Potential buyers postponed purchases indefinitely. Dealerships were full, but customers vanished. The entire industry trembled, but GM was most exposed. By late 2008, GM lost over $30 billion. 5-year losses exceeded $80 billion. Cash burned faster than leadership could react. The company was in uncontrolled free fall. Government intervention became unavoidable. In December 2008, the Bush administration approved emergency aid. TARP injected $13.4 billion into GM. Additional funds were prepared if collapse continued. This was not charity, it was survival capital. The government feared systemic economic damage. Millions of jobs depended on GM's survival. Its collapse would devastate entire supply chains nationwide. Despite aid, conditions continued worsening. By early 2009, GM drew $19 billion. Experts warned the money would not be enough. Losses accelerated beyond government intervention speed. The Obama administration inherited a financial time bomb. President Obama openly discussed bankruptcy as a restructuring tool. He framed bankruptcy as repair, not failure. GM leadership faced a brutal reality check. Bankruptcy had long been unthinkable internally. Executives feared customers would abandon a bankrupt brand. Stigma blinded leadership to reality. Structural flaws made collapse unavoidable. Loans could not fix outdated products and obligations. The government demanded a credible recovery plan. GM's proposals lacked realism and urgency. On March 30, 2009, Obama rejected GM's plan. He demanded deeper cuts and painful decisions. CEO Rick Wagoner was forced to resign immediately. Wagoner symbolized decades of denial and excess. His removal signaled zero tolerance for complacency. Fritz Henderson assumed leadership under extreme pressure. Time was running out rapidly. On June 1, 2009, GM filed Chapter 11. The case was filed in Manhattan Federal Court. GM listed $82 billion in assets. Debt totaled $172 billion. It became the largest industrial bankruptcy in US history. Judge Robert Gerber was appointed to oversee proceedings. He recognized the stakes extended beyond one company. Speed was critical to prevent industry collapse. The government backed an aggressive restructuring strategy. Section 363 enabled asset transfers. While the operations moved into a new entity, all liabilities stayed behind in bankruptcy. The government committed roughly $50 billion total. Funds included loans, financing, and operating capital. Without support, GM would have liquidated entirely. There would be no warranties or orderly wind down. On June 3rd, GM received $30 billion in emergency financing. Suppliers, workers, and dealers continued getting paid. GM entered bankruptcy with only $2 billion cash. Every operation depended on federal funding. Or GM became Motors Liquidation Company. It handled debts, lawsuits, and environmental liabilities. A new company absorbed core brands and factories. It later reclaimed the General Motors name. The restructuring moved at unprecedented speed. GM exited bankruptcy after just 40 days. Few giants had ever restructured that fast. Government deadlines forced ruthless discipline. Car production never fully stopped. Warranties were guaranteed by the US government. Customers continued buying cars without fear. That assurance prevented industry-wide panic. Internal restructuring was brutal. Saturn, Hummer, and Saab were eliminated. Chevrolet, Buick, Cadillac, and GMC survived. Every model faced strict profitability scrutiny. Plant closures were unavoidable. Over 140,000 jobs were already lost. More layoffs followed painful consolidation decisions. Entire communities felt the impact. The United Auto Workers accepted major concessions. Wages froze and benefits were reduced. Retiree healthcare moved into an independent trust. Workers received equity in the new GM. It preserved jobs while rewriting labor history. Bondholders faced heavy losses. They accepted equity instead of full repayment. Some investors fiercely resisted the plan. The court approved restructuring despite objections. The new GM emerged far leaner. Debt was slashed dramatically. Product focus shifted towards sustainability. The company survived, but was forever changed. The collapse was not caused by one mistake. It resulted from decades of complacency. GM believed its own legend. Competition and innovation were underestimated. Costs ballooned while relevance declined. Fuel prices and retiree obligations converged. The financial crisis delivered the final blow. Warning signs existed long before collapse. Delayed reform made failure inevitable. The lesson for businesses is harsh. Size does not guarantee survival. Legacy offers no protection. Markets punish denial swiftly. Ignoring trends invites rapid collapse. GM's bankruptcy remains a powerful warning. No company is too big to fail. Change rewards the adaptable. History punishes the arrogant. General Motors survived, but as a different company. It is smaller, leaner, and constantly scrutinized. The past still haunts leadership decisions. The events of 2009 left permanent scars. Every business should study this story carefully. Ask whether legacy costs are dragging you down. Question dependence on a single strategy. Test whether your structure can absorb real shocks. The market does not care about your size. It rewards relevance, efficiency, and resilience. General Motors learned this lesson in a New York courtroom.